There you are, Anahita. I was right on time.
Right on.
Thank you so much. Over to you. And with this, I'm signing off. I love the interaction we had today. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you so much for this generous introduction, and thank you for having me. All right, so I will be talking about suffering as an invitation for inner peace. And I would like to perhaps start by inviting everybody who's watching right now to take a moment to disengage from all mental activity and from all physical activity, and find a moment to just turn inwards. So committing to the next couple of minutes to just quiet the mind. And let's take some deep breaths together. So this is very simple. We're gonna begin by exhaling all the air out of the mouth and then inhaling deeply through the nose. We'll just do this for 3 cycles and then I will get started. So exhaling all the air out of the mouth, inhaling deeply through the nose. At the top of the inhalation, holding the breath for 3 counts, and then releasing through the mouth. Sighing the air out and dropping the weight of the body as you exhale. Inhaling deeply through the nose. Holding the breath at the top for 3 counts, and then exhaling, releasing through the mouth. One last time, inhaling deeply through the nose. Holding the breath, allowing the ribcage to expand, and releasing through the mouth. Sighing the air out, dropping the weight of the body. Okay. You can open your eyes and just take a moment to acknowledge if there has been any shift in the quality of your mind or body. And we're just trying to pause between sessions for a moment. Okay, so my work is rooted in contemplative science, which is basically at the intersection between Buddhist psychology and philosophy with science. Specifically, I'm interested in neuroscience and psychology, psychotherapy. So I'm going to talk about suffering and how we can work with suffering, especially in the context of what's happening today in the world. How can we basically acknowledge our suffering and gently, without in any way dismissing it or avoiding it or suppressing it, gently enable it to transform our state and perhaps access a measure of inner peace, perhaps be able to reduce the flame of suffering and maybe increase our capacity for some mental clarity, maybe even moments of happiness, maybe even moments of deep compassion or joy. So from a Buddhist point of view, and Buddhist philosophy basically would posit that the causes of suffering are threefold, fundamentally speaking. The main cause of suffering is a fundamental misunderstanding of what reality is. So this is almost like misunderstanding how the world is by not truly inquiring into the nature of reality. And so we basically are subscribing to a version of reality, to a version of life that may not be in accordance with how things really are. So we are almost like subject to our own inner narrative, to the way that we perceive reality, when reality may be something else. Then we have this compulsion, this drive towards pleasure and happiness. We are attached to things that give us a sense of happiness and pleasure, and we're constantly trying to move away from or disengage from things that we think make us suffer or bring us pain. So like a pendulum, we're swinging between I like and I don't like. I want more of what makes me happy and brings me a momentary sense of ease or pleasure or happiness, or what we call happiness, and I want less of that which makes me suffer. And so very rarely do we ever get to sort of arrive in the center point where we can experience true, let's say, equanimity. Equanimity meaning being okay with how things are, not wanting more of what gives me pleasure and happiness, not wanting less of what brings me pain or dissatisfaction, but being almost content. with the way things are. So we're all in this hamster wheel, in this hedonic wheel of seeking more pleasure and avoiding pain. And this is a very shallow, perhaps, way of living that doesn't allow us to have that final moment of satisfaction that we crave. I think many of us are seeking that moment when we can have relief from this perpetual dissatisfaction with the way things are. Just that moment of arriving and being okay with how things are. And that moment is very rare. In fact, I think most of us don't ever really get to taste it. So suffering, therefore, fundamentally is the sense of perpetual or all-pervasive dissatisfaction. And this is a psychological kind of suffering that I think many of us are experiencing at the moment. I am in no way denying the reality of the gross level, the obvious level of suffering, which is the suffering of sickness, which is all around us, and death. That is suffering that is unavoidable. There's a suffering of impermanence or instability, the reality that everything is changing. We can't control it. It's beyond our control because the nature of things is to be in flux. So that we can't control. But this subtle psychological suffering that I'm talking about, this all-pervasive dissatisfaction, this white noise that is constantly invading our mind, our mental space, and is constantly making us want to change how things are, that we can change, that we can work with. And that's where the mind training practices really come in handy. So it begins with, how do we transform our suffering into inner peace? It begins with a simple and courageous act of acknowledging the reality of suffering, right? Because we are pain avoiders, and to really look pain or suffering in the eye is a very uncomfortable process. We try to deny it. We try to suppress it. We try to eat sugar. I think a lot of people that I'm talking to at the moment or coaching also are telling me that they're overeating. They're buying all kinds of really strange candies and chocolates and baking a lot, which is all wonderful. But I think at the end of the day, we have to question our motivation. Are we just craving a momentary sugar high or a momentary cessation of this discomfort that we're experiencing, psychologically speaking? Or are we truly genuinely, are we really taking pleasure, and is it really giving us something of value or benefit to let's say, overeat, or to indulge in certain habits that may give us temporary relief, like smoking or drinking, for example? No judgment, but I think a little bit of too much of that may not be very beneficial. So we are seeking pleasure, and in our pursuit of pleasure, which is so compulsive, so unquestioned, so almost mechanical in a way, we rarely stop to look at what is wrong, right? To really acknowledge, how am I really feeling in this moment? And as I said, this takes courage. So looking at your own suffering, initially it will require awareness, right? An awareness to be able to just step back with a sense of objectivity. Look at your suffering, okay? And how do we look at our suffering, practically speaking? I would say, you want to disengage from activity. Maybe find a way to sit down for a moment and ask yourself, what is causing me pain or suffering in this moment? And this kind of inner inquiry, this kind of tuning inwards or empathy that is directed at yourself, is actually really healing. For many of us, as children, we may not have had the skillful parent or parents that had that level of attunement to our inner reality, that may not have been able to really empathize with whatever was happening internally in us, emotionally, psychologically. So we didn't really receive that kind of attunement or empathy. So giving that to ourselves is a really powerful way to heal, basically, and to also gradually start to dismantle the suffering. So asking, what is causing me suffering in this moment? Stopping and really allowing the answer to arise, right? So it may be deep-seated sense of anxiety, a fear of what is going to happen to me in the future. It may be a mental addiction of sorts, or an addictive behavior that's making me really unhappy with myself, that's making me feel ashamed or guilty, but I'm constantly perpetuating it. It could be a deep sense of grief or sadness at the reality of what's happening in the world. Maybe you yourself have been subject to the virus, or you have known somebody who is suffering from it. You've known people that have died from it. You are losing your work. Your brother, your sister is suffering tremendously, your friend, so forth. Or you're just a compassionate human being that is, really saddened by what is happening. So asking yourself, what is causing me suffering? And really allowing that answer to arise, right? So not trying to sort of force it in this top-down approach, but really allowing your answer to arise. It's anxiety, or it's sadness, it's grief, and trying to refrain from judging it. So that means having a very neutral, very objective way of relating with it, or viewing it. And once you've done that, what I recommend to do is, once you've acknowledged your suffering, and remember, in Buddhism, they say that suffering is often described as that which is hard to look at. So by really looking at your suffering, you're almost opening the door, you're opening the gateway to then transform it, right? So once you've done that, once you're clear, you've named it, you've labeled it, it's anxiety, it's sadness, you may find that just by holding it in awareness, by being able to relate with it, by acknowledging it, the burning, the pain of it might subside a little bit, right? So it might feel like, almost like it became a little bit more integrated, rather than it's something that you've been, exerting so much energy to avoid or to brush under the carpet. Once you've done that, you can go even further. You can say, how is it manifesting physically? How does this anxiety or the grief that I'm feeling, this anger, maybe it's some kind of subtle anger or rage that you have towards the government, that your government, or this social economic structure of the world, or capitalism, whatever it is. Whatever it is, see if you can see how it manifests. Ask yourself, how is it manifesting in my body? Where is it represented? And how is it manifesting? It may be a tightness in the chest. It could be a tightness in the jaw. It could be a sense of pressure in the head. It could be a sense of turmoil, or like, kind of a unrest in the abdomen, in the digestive system. It could be tension in the hips and the pelvis region. So identify it in the body. Right? So really granting this reality, it's deserved what credit. We're saying you are there, and I take you into consideration. I am acknowledging you, and by way of doing that, you are lessening its power. So once you found it in your body, you can begin to ask yourself, how does this suffering impact my behavior, my actions, right? So you have three faculties with which you act. From a Buddhist point of view, these would be your body, your speech, and your mind, right? So every action you take with your body, every word you utter, every thought, movement of mind or thought process will have some kind of consequence. So you start to ask yourself, so this is a simple process of inquiry. How does this suffering actually impact my actions? What is it causing me to do? How is it actually impacting my behaviors, my relationships, the way I'm communicating, the choices I'm making? And then very soberly, you ask yourself, is this what I want? Do I want to engage in these actions? And are these actions congruent with the results that I want? Yeah. So if you have some kind of subtle anxiety at the moment, and your relief is to eat, or to drink alcohol, let's just say, you can ask yourself, well, is eating sugar or drinking alcohol, does it actually yield the kind of results that I want? Does it actually give me the kind of relief that I'm seeking, or is it just a temporary relief? In fact, does it actually perpetuate or exasperate my suffering in adding more shame and guilt and putting on weight and harming my health and everything else? So really being sober and honest with yourself. Are my actions congruent with the results that I want? And if the answer is no, then you may have to backtrack again and say, okay, well, good, because of things being subject to cause and effect. If something is caused, you can change the cause. So if you're not liking the results you're getting, you can go back and change the cause. So how do we do that? How do we begin to disengage from negative habits that are not congruent with the kind of results we want? And then slowly begin to engage in the kind of habits that actually produce the kind of happiness and the sense of inner peace that we want. So once you've done this contemplative practice and you've become really clear, you've arrived at conviction that engaging in these negative habits as a way of coping with the anxiety or with the suffering does not yield results, you begin to restrain those actions. So this is a very simple but actually difficult process of becoming so acutely aware of your mental habits, of your speaking habits, of your bodily habits, that you find yourself about to engage in them and you stop. It's really like you're flexing some kind of inner muscle. It's a muscle of restraint, and you are stopping yourself from engaging. You're stopping yourself from empowering that habit. Yeah, so this is going to lead to a lot of failures, and it's going to require a lot of perseverance and resilience and humility for you to just keep getting back up and trying again. And the fact is, you're going to have immense amount of triggers and opportunities to re-engage in those negative habits, and you will probably fail initially, but do not give up and just keep trying as you try to restrain those negative habits. The question really is, what do you want to cultivate? So if suffering and the kind of, the negative behaviors that arise from an avoidance of suffering, a wanting to make suffering go away, if that doesn't actually produce happiness, what does produce happiness? How can I use my suffering to actually access really, let's say, the true nature of the mind, the true nature, as the contemplative traditions would say, our essence? And that may require some practices. And those practices, again, as a Buddhist practitioner, as a student of Buddhism, I really can't begin to emphasize the importance and the value of meditation. Meditation not as a way of making ourselves temporarily feel good or to relax our nervous system or to reduce stress or increase productivity, but really meditation as a very systematic way of understanding how the mind creates suffering and how to stop those mechanisms of mind to then really disable the suffering machine, right? So for that, we must learn to let's say, have little experiences of what the mind is beneath the very shallow processes of cognition, of memory, of self-making. So we just tune inwards. And there are so many powerful meditation techniques out there. And I just, I would say that to me, what is really powerful to begin with are practices that strengthen your concentration. So anything that allows you to gain control over your attention will be of benefits, because the more control you have over your attention, the higher the likelihood is of you being happy. So try to engage in practices that really help you stabilize your attention, gain control over your attention. And then as you gain control over your attention and you're able to, for example, focus on the breath for longer periods of time, you may find that the compulsive habits of the mind may start to slow down, become gently suppressed. And what may then become more revealed or more apparent may be states of clarity, states of peace, states of tranquility that will totally shift your state. And that's really as simple as it is. It will take a lot of discipline initially to learn to gain control over your attention, but I think once that's done, you will have little glimpses, and those glimpses are transformational. So then coming back to how to work with your suffering. So we talked about identifying the suffering, labeling it, feeling in the body, seeing that how the suffering impacts our behavior and how that behavior may not actually produce the kind of results we want. We restrain that kind of those habits, that behavior, and we ask ourselves, what kind of behavior is actually congruent with the results that I seek, with the happiness I seek, with a sense of connection I seek, with the peace I seek. And that's a really beautiful creative process of intentionally and deliberately taking actions of body, speech, and mind that produce happiness. So, some of those habits may be, like I said, the meditation practices. I would say generosity. Gratitude is a profoundly powerful practice, honestly, not to be underestimated. doing short contemplation practices where you take stock of all the things that are right in your life, that are good already. Those are really powerful. So I recommend gratitude practices. I would recommend genuine, deep, authentic connecting with other people. Any kind of connection that takes you out of your preoccupation with yourself, you're obsessing about yourself and your own happiness and your own desires, will probably reduce suffering. So there are myriad ways of engaging in actions that actually produce happiness. But I would really like to emphasize for today the power of meditation, the power of turning inwards, gaining control over our attention, and little by little getting glimpses of what is our true nature, or the true nature of mind, beyond, again, those superficial cognitive processes that always are somehow revolving around the self. They're emphasizing a self. They're relational to a sense of, or relative to a sense of self. And